Okay, so you're here because you want to like really get a handle on something, right? You want to dive into a story that's got some layers to it. I mean, something fascinating that we can unpack,
Yeah.
without getting completely bogged down in all the tiny details. And today's story, well, let's just say it's exactly that. We're going deep on this one.
Yeah, this is a wild one.
It is the story of Lizzie Halliday.
Lizzie Halliday.
She was an Irish-American woman,
Yeah.
and she became, a really mysterious figure back in the late 1800s.
Definitely.
And we've got some biographical accounts, and also just some of those incredibly sensational, newspaper articles from back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Those old newspapers are just amazing for this kind of stuff. Really capture the flavor of the time.
Oh, absolutely. And through all that, we're going to try to figure out, you know, the key events of her life.
Yeah.
All the different names she used. She had a lot of aliases. And then, of course, like the just pure drama surrounding her crimes and the craziness of the legal stuff that came after.
Yeah. I mean, this case, man, it really shines a light on, that whole period in the late 1800s. Ideas about crime and gender and especially mental health. It was like everything was changing so fast. And Lizzie Halliday's story, it's not just a bunch of events. It's like she's right in the middle of all these, societal tensions.
Oh, yeah.
It's playing out in such a dramatic way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's our goal here, right? To
Yeah.
navigate all that and really understand, what made this case so notorious, why people still talk about it over 100 years later.
Exactly. And there's one thing that really jumped out at me, right away when I was first looking into this. Lizzie Halliday was the first woman ever sentenced to death by an electric chair in New York State.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty heavy distinction to have.
It is.
Makes you realize, just how serious this case got.
So let's start at the beginning. I mean, where did this all begin?
Well, the story starts in Ireland. County Antrim, to be precise. That's where Eliza Margaret McNally was born, around 1859. So that's her real name, before all the aliases. And she came to the United States as a kid, probably like between 3 and 8 years old, somewhere in there.
Okay, so she gets to America, and then what? I mean, it seems like her adult life kicks off with just a whole bunch of really fast-paced, kind of messed up relationships.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a major pattern we see with her, like right off the bat. In 1879, she marries this guy known as Charles Hopkins, except his real name was Kettspool Brown. You know how it is with aliases back then?
Oh, yeah.
They supposedly had a son who ended up being institutionalized, and then Hopkins dies in 1881, just 2 years after they get married.
So that's one husband gone.
Yeah.
And I mean, she doesn't exactly wait around for the next one.
No, not at all. That same year, 1881, she marries Artemus Brewer, a pensioner. And guess what? He dies within a year, too.
Oh, wow. What are the odds?
Right. After Brewer, she marries Hiram Parkinson. But that marriage falls apart in less than a year. Parkinson leaves. And then she marries George Smith. He actually served with Brewer, back in the war. But here's where things start to get a little creepy. There's this report of Lizzie trying to poison Smith with arsenic, like putting it in his tea.
Whoa. Poison tea. That's a little intense.
Yeah, it is. And you know what happens? She takes off. She runs away to Vermont. So now it's not just bad luck with relationships. There's a hint of something deliberate, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
A suggestion that she might be capable of some seriously bad things.
So even in Vermont, though, this pattern of short-lived, relationships keeps going.
Oh, yeah, it totally does. She marries a Vermont guy, Charles Playstyle. And then, get this, she disappears 2 weeks later. Poof.
Gone.
That is unbelievable.
Right, so you put all these marriages together, all these early deaths and disappearances, and it really paints a picture of a very unstable life. And looking back, you have to wonder what was really going on in these relationships. Right. It's like there's this wave of chaos and potential tragedy that's kind of following her around. And then it switches up. She shows up in Philadelphia.
Exactly. Around the winter of 1888, she pops up in Philly calling herself Maggie Hopkins this time. At a saloon owned by the McCullen family. They were friends from back in Ireland. She even opens a shop there, tries to go straight,
But this new start doesn't last long.
Nope. She gets convicted of arson, burned down her own shop to get the insurance money, got 2 years in Eastern State Penitentiary for that one. So now we have like a confirmed crime. It shows she's willing to break the law, to get ahead. It's a big step up from those suspicious deaths and disappearances.
Definitely is. Okay, so she does her time, and then the story moves again. This time it's upstate New York.
Yep, 1889. Now she's calling herself Lizzie Brown. And she gets hired as a housekeeper for this guy, Paul Halliday. He's a farmer up in Burlingham, New York. 70 years old, widowed twice.
And those two end up getting married.
You guessed it.
Of course they do.
And surprise, surprise, this marriage is not exactly smooth sailing.
Right. According to Lizzie herself, she was having these spells of insanity that were making things difficult.
Yeah, that's what she claimed.
And within a couple years, that familiar destructive pattern comes back. The Halliday house burns down, the barn burns down.
Yep. And you know who they suspect?
I think I can guess. Lizzie Wright.
Lizzie. Arson again. This whole fire thing, it's a really disturbing theme with her, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. And then there's that whole thing with the horses.
Oh, yeah. That one's a little murky on the dates. Some sources say 1890, some say 1893, but basically she steals a team of horses, convinces a neighbor to help her take them to Newburgh, and then sells them.
Bold move.
Right. But here's the kicker. She gets acquitted. Reason. Insanity. So even before all the really bad stuff, this whole idea of her being insane, it starts to play a big role in how the legal system deals with her.
That's fascinating. And, I mean, it is remarkable how this whole insanity thing just keeps popping up around her.
Yeah, it's definitely a recurring theme. But then things get really, really bad. The fires turn deadly.
Yeah. May 1891. The Halliday house burns down again, but this time Lizzie's son, John, he dies in the fire.
This is where the stakes get so much higher.
Yeah. And this is the son who is intellectually disabled, right?
Right. And apparently Lizzie wasn't too fond of him.
There's that detail about his bedroom door being locked from the outside and Lizzie having the key.
Exactly. Makes you wonder.
She claimed he died trying to save her, but it doesn't really add up, does it?
No, it doesn't. So now we've got a potential murder on top of everything else. And it's just going to get worse from here.
It's just awful.
Yeah.
And the destruction doesn't stop there, does it?
Nope. Pretty soon after that, the Halliday barn and their mill, they both burn down too. Then Lizzie tries to run off with another guy, gets caught, and ends up in an institution for a little while.
But then she gets released, right?
Right. One account I read said she was considered cured. Can you believe that?
Cured. Wow.
So she ends up going right back to Paul Halliday, back to the same volatile situation. It's like she can't escape this pattern of destruction.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And then August rolls around and Paul Halliday disappears.
Yeah, vanishes.
Lizzie says he's off doing some masonry work in a nearby town.
Right. But the neighbors, they're starting to get suspicious. They don't buy her story.
So they get a search warrant.
And on September 4th, they make a truly horrifying discovery.
The bodies of Margaret and Sarah McQuillan.
Buried in the barn, in hay, both shot to death.
And these are the women from the McQuillan family in Philadelphia.
The same ones, from that saloon where Lizzie was staying. So now there's this connection to her past in this really violent way.
It's chilling.
It is. When they question Lizzie about it, her behavior is completely erratic, like tearing at her clothes, talking nonsense. Some people thought it was genuine, like a mental breakdown. Others thought she was faking it, trying to act insane so she wouldn't get blamed for the murders.
It's a really disturbing scene to imagine.
Yeah. And just a few days later, it gets even worse.
They find Paul Halliday's body.
Under the floorboards of his own house.
Mm-hmm.
Mutilated. Also shot. So at this point, Lizzie's officially charged with all the murders, and they take her to the Sullivan County Jail in Monticello, New York.
And in jail, her behavior is, well, it's pretty terrifying from the accounts I've read.
Oh, yeah, it was extreme. She refused to eat, attacked the sheriff's wife, set her bed on fire, tried to kill herself multiple times, cutting her throat with broken glass. There's this quote from her. She said, "I thought I would cut myself to see if I would bleed." Like, wow. Eventually they had to chain her to the floor. I mean, just to keep her from hurting herself or others.
Yeah, you can't even imagine.
It's a really unsettling image, right? Whether she was genuinely in that much mental distress or whether she was putting on an act. It's a powerful image.
So this is when the whole case blows up.
Oh, yeah. National news, all the papers are going crazy with it, tabloids especially. All kinds of sensationalized stories. The New York World called it unprecedented and almost without parallel in the annals of crime.
Wow.
So yeah, it definitely captured the public's imagination.
And some pretty big-name journalists got involved too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Nellie Bly, she was working for The World at the time. She was a huge investigative journalist, and she actually went and interviewed Lizzie in jail. And during that interview, Lizzie starts talking about her past marriages, and Bly's able to verify a lot of it. And then you've got Paul Halliday's son, Robert. He becomes like this major source for the press. Everyone's trying to piece together Lizzie's past, and he's got all this insider info.
It's amazing how those connections and those big personalities really fueled all that media attention.
Absolutely.
And there are all these just wild theories going around too, aren't there?
Oh, yeah, tons of them. The Sullivan County Sheriff even publicly speculated that maybe Lizzie was Jack the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper, come on!
I know, right? Like, there was zero evidence.
Zero.
But it just shows how much people were trying to connect her to every other big crime at the time. It was like a feeding frenzy.
And it seems like the newspapers were really digging into her past with all those husbands, too.
Oh, yeah. They were all over that. She'd been married 5 times before Paul Halliday. 2 of those husbands died pretty soon after the wedding. And then there's that whole attempted poisoning thing with another one. So people were starting to think maybe she was responsible for even more deaths. Some estimates went up to 6. The New York Times even ran a piece on it. They were careful to say it was all speculation, but, they pointed out just how many deaths were surrounding this woman. It was hard to ignore.
It really is. And wasn't there a story about her confessing to one of Paul Halliday's relatives?
Yeah, Robert Halliday. She supposedly told him that she'd killed a husband back in Belfast and got away with it. Now, whether it's true or not, it just added to the whole cloud of suspicion hanging over her.
So all of this leads to her trial.
Right. June 24, 1894. The trial takes place at the Sullivan County Oyer and Terminer Court. That was basically like a high-level criminal court in New York back then. And Lizzie Halliday is convicted of murdering Margaret and Sarah McQuillan. And get this, she becomes the first woman in New York State to be sentenced to death by electrocution.
The electric chair.
Yep. Brand new at the time. Supposed to be more humane than hanging, but still pretty controversial.
Definitely a historical moment.
Yeah.
But in the end, she never actually went to the electric chair, did she?
No, she didn't. The Governor Roswell P. Flower, he commuted her sentence to life in a mental institution. A medical commission declared her insane. It probably had a lot to do with all the questions about her mental state all along, right? From how she acted after the murders to that earlier acquittal because of insanity. Our understanding of mental illness back then, it was just so different than it is now. And the legal definition of insanity. Super vague.
So instead of prison, she ends up at Matawan State Hospital for the criminally insane.
Yep. And her behavior there takes another turn. She becomes what they called a model patient, gets sewing privileges even, which meant she had access to scissors and stuff. And she gets really close to one of the attendants, Nellie Wicks. But then Nellie decides to leave the hospital. And Lizzie does not handle it well.
Not well at all.
1906. Lizzie kills Nellie Wicks, stabs her something like 200 times with a pair of scissors. Just brutal. It's a really awful reminder that even in a controlled environment like that, the potential for violence can still be there, especially with someone like Lizzie.
So how does Lizzie Halliday's story end?
She basically lived out the rest of her days in Matawan, died there in 1918 from Bright's disease, spent almost half her life in that asylum. It's a long and incredibly messed up story, full of instability, suspicion, and ultimately brutal violence.
It's really something, when you look at the whole thing from her coming to America and all those whirlwind marriages to the murders and the media frenzy, it's just wild. And the way Lizzie Halliday is portrayed in the newspapers, it's almost contradictory. Sometimes she's a victim of her own insanity. Other times she's this ice-cold killer.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big things that makes this case so interesting. It really shows us how much people back then were struggling to understand female criminals, especially ones who were violent. Was Lizzie mentally ill? Was she a manipulator? Or was it some mix of both? The press definitely had a huge impact on how people saw her. All that sensationalism probably even affected her trials.
So here's something to think about. We've gone through a lot here. All those deaths, her erratic behavior, the shifting accounts of her mental state. What do you think? Was Lizzie Halliday truly insane? And is she responsible for all those deaths that seemed to follow her everywhere she went? What does this whole case, with all its dark twists and turns and the media circus surrounding it, tell us about how society viewed women who committed crimes over 100 years ago? It's a lot to think about, even after we wrap